get employment, sustainable employment for at least a group of persons or cadre of persons from those areas, and will keep them gainfully employed. In fact, the last conversation I had was with the persons who are involved in this and Keith, they're ready to work, and the answer was yes. And there's a meeting that we are having on Wednesday to shore up that arrangement. The names are already there. I have the names. I have names from all of the areas. So what I did, I went out. We got the names of persons who are unemployed, who need young persons, young men, young women, who need to be gainfully employed, who need to get life skills that will lure them away from this spectrum of crime and this spectrum of criminal activity. The fact that it could be said that there aren't home invasions in certain areas, I don't know if that is so. I don't know if that is so.
Mr. Scotland, do you believe that such programs have worked and are working? Because tie that back into what Minister Foster Cummings suggested. The government are creating opportunities, they're not giving handouts. But arguably, if it does not, even though an individual is given training, if they cannot utilize such skills afterwards because they cannot find an apprenticeship or they cannot find a job, then how do you expect productivity to take place when they don't even have money to invest in themselves?
I agree that it's an opportunity, and maybe we ought to do more to have follow-up. So in other words, that plumber, for instance, when he graduated, and I was at that graduation, directly thereafter, the Monday morning, I received a call, and I had to say, well, look, no, it is not as if there is something here that is laying for you. You have to go out and get projects. And you know what? By the Wednesday, he was doing a project right around the bridge at Piccadilly and following up with something else. We must have follow-up services. That is something that is absolutely necessary, because to give someone the skills and then not give them an opportunity to utilize the skills may very well result in added frustration and persons saying, well, look, you told me, get the skills, I made the sacrifice and I got it. Now that I am enthused and I'm renewed, I don't have an opportunity. And that may even sink them more into the quagmire. So that is something that has to be looked at, and certainly that is something that I am looking at.
Well, Mr. Scotland, you've also suggested that the majority are law-abiding citizens within these areas, and I will take that. Except, could you explain, because it still baffles me, that if the majority are law-abiding citizens, how can we hear more about the bad apples than anything else? We're not hearing about the impact of such programs that you are suggesting. We're not hearing about the results of such from the citizens or constituents living in such areas. We're only hearing about the bad apples that are being reported, the criminals and members of gangs from those areas. Why is that the case?
Maybe you have to look within. Maybe you have to look at aspects of the mainstream media, aspects of social media. Yesterday, for example, and I will tell you, and this is good news, and I will bring good news this morning in this weather, and this is, I say that this is good weather. We had a program whereby over 100 grants, and this is self-help grants, were given out to persons of Laventille West, Port of Spain South, East Dry River, St. John. When I say Port of Spain South, I'm identifying the areas, and Straker. I have seen no coverage, no mainstream media coverage. These are of that. But that is good news. But maybe good news does not newsworthy, or does not newspapers, or does not news clips sell, or social media sell. Where is the good news on that? That was given out yesterday, and persons who may have waited quite some time, persons who have applied, persons who want to improve their living conditions, were afforded that opportunity, and not as a handout. Because if you understand what self-help is about, You get the material and you do the old-time lanyap. You have the persons come from your community or family, and sometimes you may have to pay, but hopefully the payment will be something that is the lesser input. But you have that available. Where is that news? Did you know about that, sir? Has your state...
If I'm speaking honest with you, no, I did not know about it.
And that is good news. But you see, that is not a home invasion. That is not sensational. I am not saying, so there are two things happening here. I'm not saying, and for 1 minute advocating that anything negative should be hidden under a bushel. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there are positive things happening. And it is not getting the limelight. It is not getting the focus. They're not getting the focus that it deserves. And because maybe, and I don't know because I'm not a specialist in the area, maybe it's because it doesn't sell. Maybe it's because it is no longer trending.
Or maybe because the communications unit has not sent me the email, because I'm looking at the inbox right now for our media house and I have no notification of that. So that is also something to consider, because I assure you that such a thing would be covered. But the next point I want to ask you, sir, is how are we so sure? What measures are in place to ensure that when such grants, such good news is given out and handed out, if that is the case, what measures are in place to ensure that they are getting into the right hands, into people who will actually utilize it? What measures are in place afterwards to ensure that this money is being spent for development, and I say positive development, rather than anybody just getting a grant and utilizing it for their own?
I'm very happy that you asked that. For this program, there was a rigorous process. Let me tell you how it started. It started from persons legitimately applying, and when they applied, they would come, certainly the ones from our constituency, they came. I made sure we did the proper interview. Site visits were made to the properties to ensure that what they're asking for is what is required. And they're not getting the money. They're getting it's like the voucher to go to the hardware, to purchase the material that would improve, that will assist in the improvement of their houses. So it is certainly streamlined, and the persons who, I can tell you, lady from Straker, the family from Bonds Road, the family from East Dry River, these are places that I have visited, that the self-help group has visited, and ensured they've done their due diligence to show that what was requested was what was required, and the relevant assistance was given for them, not in cash. They would have the amount in the grant to go to the hardware. And what we told them, we even gave them a tutorial. Ensure that the amount that you were given is what you're getting from whichever hardware you go to, and ensure that whoever your contractor is, that you get value for money. And that was part of the tutorial yesterday. Maybe part of the fault lies with communicating these events, these good news events, to persons. You mentioned something that the phenomenon of fights in school. It is violence in school, and I speak about violence that is out of control. Students and teachers involved in fracas, because a normal fight in a school is nothing novel. If you grew up, I'm sure you grew up in a school. You've never been in a fight whilst you were in school, sir?
Of course.
I have been.
But I don't know. I don't know what is so novel about what we're witnessing now.
No. That is where we are, and more importantly too, now that we have everyone with a cell phone to transmit that on social media, it becomes something that is now out there. And notice I'm not saying blown out of proportion, because that type of violence that we are witnessing is something that needs to be looked at, and we need to look at root causes. Why are these young people so angry? and we need to also look at other means of conflict resolution.
Well, Mr. Scotland, we don't have much time left, but I have two questions for you. One, unfortunately, forgive me if I've gone a bit Mutt and Jeff, but in the sense that I keep only hearing about grants, and I must ask you if you wholeheartedly believe that this is what is working. Is this the only thing that is absolutely working? Because it's the only thing that I hear about. And the second aspect is, as much as you've suggested that the media looks within themselves, I must say advice is always easier given than taken. With respect to violence, with respect to hatred, is it true as well? Should the advice also be extended to members of parliament and on all sides to look within themselves as well? Because if I could point out social media posts by a colleague of yours and the Honourable Minister of National Security, sometimes you have to wonder whether or not we're actually trying to solve a problem or if we're just actually adding to the issues or actually pushing the fire.
Your question brings to stark focus the message, the messenger, and what is received, because part of what I've not at all today spoken just about grants, I've spoken about people having life skills. Now, what you heard alone was grants, but that's not what I said alone. I said there's the MyLad program, the MyPad program, the Men Empowerment program, the 40 for 40 program, and those are programs that give people life skills.
The 40 and the 40 program you're speaking about?
The 40 that is persons under 40. That's another program that maybe we need to get with the program so that it's out there so people understand it. But the point I'm making is this. There are other things that are being done, and that has escaped, and we're having the conversation, but that's what you're receiving. That's the first thing. Secondly, it is always good. And that's why I was cautious when I said, look, it is looking, and this just does not apply to the media. It certainly would apply to members of parliament. I cannot gainsay to speak for anyone other than myself, but certainly looking inward is something that is always positive. Having done this journey now for 2.5 years and having, also been out on social media, I'm a little more cautious in what I say, lest the message not be received or be interpreted in a certain way. So introspection is always good, and particularly when it leads at the end of the day to some sort of wisdom or a different approach or a more mature approach. And that is something that I would recommend for everyone, not just media, not just politicians, but for everyone in Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Scotland, thank you very much for joining me this morning. I know as we were speaking before we came on air, you have a busy schedule ahead, but thank you very much.
No, that is okay. And I as we were talking off here before I came on, if you would know, April Showers is not anything by any means novel. I will not tell them this song that we were discussing.
Have a good day, Mr. Scotland, and hopefully we can continue this conversation at a later date and time.
We can, and I'm always willing to engage in the conversation. And I certainly will say that if it is that you have looked into your inbox and you did not see the invitation, maybe part of the fault in not bringing the good news out there is that we are not inviting the houses, the media houses, to participate in the good news. But there was good news in Trinidad and Tobago. That's how I'd want to end it.
Well, hopefully we can hear more about those good news to come. But for now, we'll have to end it there. Thanks, sir. Keep well.
You're welcome, sir.
And that was Mr. Keith Scotland, Member of Parliament for Port of Spain South. This morning we're speaking about identifying criminal hotspots and what measures have succeeded or have failed. I suppose at the end of the day, the success and the failure of such is truly up to the viewer to actually figure it out for themselves, to judge based off of that, but also to hear about recipients of such grants or graduates of such programs, to hear their thoughts and how it has benefited them or not benefited them. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, well, we get into another conversation this morning. Stay tuned.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, feeding accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher Price, Cocomelon, Intex pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in store at Southern Main Road, MacBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Balancing your career and work with your personal life is a struggle.
I thought it was a good example I was setting for my kids. So they would see hard work, perseverance, long hours pays off. But I never felt like I could have achieved enough. It was never enough.
A lot of people, because of those trauma and original sensitizing events and how we were brought up, we tend to put ourselves last. We tend to put other people first, work first, other people, and we tend to put ourselves last. And that is a recipe for disaster.
What's Up, Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN Content Capital.
This May, the spectacular event you've been waiting for is coming. May 27th, celebrate amazing North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Festival grounds, Blashy Shares. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.
Welcome back to AM Prime. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not aware, we're still actually in a pandemic. The World Health Organization has not downgraded us from a pandemic to an endemic. We're actually still very much in the fight against COVID-19. But fortunately, we're out of the major restrictions. However, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted upon our lives? We're all aware of the issues associated with medicine, health, and even mental stress. But what about other aspects, such as human rights? This morning I'm joined by Ms. Denise Pitcher. She is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, and she's with us via Zoom. Good morning, Ms. Pitcher.
Good morning, Keaton. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you very much for joining me. The COVID-19 pandemic, there were measures implemented by various governments throughout the world, including Trinidad and Tobago's government, such as the state of emergency, such as lockdown, which led to the restrictions of fundamental human rights, and even measures taken with regards to the rule of law. How, and it's a general question, in what ways has this impacted upon the conversation and perhaps the implementation of human rights?
So, in states of emergencies or in emergency situations such as these public health emergencies, the state, they do have a right based on international human rights law and in the Constitution to suspend human rights to protect, the wider public health and to mitigate any risks to life. So what we've observed, of course, we've had restriction on freedom of movement with, border closures, lockdowns, closures of schools, work from home. All of those measures were implemented to mitigate the risk and to contain the spread of the virus. But when states are implementing these measures, they must make sure that it's legal, proportionate to the risks or the threats posed, and also within a specific time frame. It's not supposed to be, indefinite. They're supposed to be as long as the threat, relevant or in relation to the risks posed.
How would you describe Trinidad and Tobago's institutions to defend fundamental liberties and ensure that best practice in terms of human rights are certainly in place?
I'm sorry. Can you rephrase that?
How would you describe, or how would you judge Trinidad and Tobago's institutional capacities to actually defend fundamental liberties and ensure that human rights are in place, human rights are practiced, fundamental human rights, that is?
So, Trinidad and Tobago, we generally enjoy a relatively high level of human rights in terms of freedom of expression, freedom of movement, access to health, access to education. One of the things that we have mentioned in the past is access to justice. That seems to be a big gap in terms of our institutional capacity for the enjoyment of human rights.
But in terms of our public policy, in terms of government's handling of situations, how is it important for the government to keep updating the nation as to their fight to ensure that human rights are practiced?
I guess in terms of, revision of public policies, public participation, including public participation in the decision-making process when they are, deliberating on what public policies are necessary, either to restrict human rights or to advance human rights. That's really, really important. Making sure that, yes, necessary information is there. In terms of, what rights might be infringed on. And I think the government, during the course of the pandemic was very, very good in terms of communicating information in terms of what would happen in terms of, health information. So I think in that respect, the government did a really good job in communication.
Now, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic and even following lockdowns and restrictions here in Trinidad and Tobago, issues were raised with instances such as detention centers and even instances of having COVID-19 facilities. Has such issues been resolved, or is the organization still fighting a battle that seems to be getting nowhere or improving?
So one of the measures that the government implemented during the pandemic was the establishment of this, temporary detention facility at the Chaguaramas heliport that was meant to deal with migrants coming into the country in order to contain the spread, which at the time, in compliance with international human rights law, and also, with, similar to measures taken globally, would have been, legitimate and proportionate to the risk posed. However, that heliport has now become a de facto detention facility. And, the risks, everybody else in Trinidad and Tobago, more or less, the restrictions have been lifted. And this heliport, is not a legitimate detention facility. The concerns by CCHR is this detention facility or this facility in the heliport, which is based in Chagaramas in a military base, does it meet the criteria of an immigration detention facility? And the concerns that we have as well too is, of course, there's ongoing indefinite detention of persons. Then even more concerning, we continue to receive reports about sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation of women and girls in the heliport. And because it's based in a military base, because it's located in a military base, it restricts access to groups like us and other human rights groups that may want to conduct monitoring exercises to be able to, to verify if they meet, international human rights standards. Another concern as well too is because it's not a legitimate detention facility, and it's run by Coast Guard officials, and it's not run by immigration officials. So there's a question of what training do they have, what technical expertise do they have, these Coast Guard, to deal with immigration detention issues. Are they sensitive to the needs of persons seeking asylum, sensitive to the needs of migrants, sensitive to the needs, the different needs of women and girls, of children, because children do also end up in these detention facilities, from this particular facility, from time to time. So that's a big concern for us.
Now, you raised some points there which I've taken note of, but you've also raised very serious allegations. Now, the allegations are not specific to whether or not it's military individuals actually engaging in such abuse, or if it's from other men who have been detained, or even other women. However, has the organization been in communication with the relevant authorities, such as the Ministry of National Security, or even the Office of the Attorney General, to raise such issues and such concerns?
So because there are recent reports that just came out over the weekend, we're still trying to establish some facts and clarify what the situation is. But there was a recent report that's very, very concerning that's been circulating. So until we have more information on that situation and on the ongoing situation, accusations, allegations against, state officials running that facility, then we will, reach out and request. We think is necessary now to request access to the facility to at least conduct some monitoring exercises. Of course, because it's in a military facility, we may face, some challenges in terms of being granted access.
Now, what recommendations would you make to try and actually decrease such negative impacts and to mitigate the risk of such reoccurrences in the future? What would be some of the recommendations that you would put forward?
So, in general, in terms of what measures states adopt to deal with, public health emergencies like COVID-19, the government should, approach any measures, integrate a human rights approach. So, for example, with this detention facility specifically, even though it may have been necessary and legal and proportionate to the risk at the time, there doesn't seem to be an awareness, or at least any sort of human rights approach that was integrated in terms of, what the needs of asylum seekers would be in terms of the indefinite detention. And of course, because, these are asylum seekers, they need to be dealt with by persons that are specifically trained to deal with asylum seekers and refugees, because they're a particularly vulnerable population. And so in that respect, it's important that, governments take into consideration those needs. We could also extend it to where we did school lockdowns as well too. And now where we're seeing, there are lots of behaviors manifesting after prolonged lockdown of children at home, and their development needs being delayed because of these lockdowns. So again, it's about, identifying what the issues might be in terms of what these types of measures would impose, and then also trying to look at it through that human rights lens, to be able to allow people to continue to enjoy their rights without having it completely removed during these measures.
Arguably, given the nature of this conversation and where we are right now from where we've started, the biggest impact that COVID-19 and the pandemic has had on human rights, specifically to Trinidad is mostly to do with our immigration policies and our immigration position and stance. Is that the case?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Arguably, given the nature of this conversation, is it fair to suggest that the COVID-19 pandemic, its impact on human rights, specifically to Trinidad, has been mostly on our immigration policy?
Definitely. I mean, the border closures, this detention facility, we had, an extended, border closure in relation to other nations around the world. And, that limits a person's ability to access asylum. And we've emphasized in the past, to engage in measures where that right is not completely taken away from, even in public health emergencies, rights should be, to the full extent where possible, enjoyed. And the government should take every necessary measure to be able to, for that enjoyment of rights, as long as it doesn't, pose a tremendous threat to public health. But the enjoyment of rights is important. And yes, our Immigration Act and immigration policies have been particularly harsh. And, now we're seeing a situation where this measure has been extended beyond the public health emergency. And it's now putting vulnerable persons who already face risks at even further risks. So, yes, definitely the immigration policies with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, yes, they're definitely, worrying, concerning.
Well, Ms. Pitcher, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning, and thank you for raising that final point with regards to the immigration policy. Certainly it's something to have further examination and further conversation on. But thank you very much for the conversation this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Keep well. All the best. Ms. Denise Pitcher, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, as we spoke, as we concluded that particular conversation, the greatest impact that COVID-19 has had on human rights, specifically to Trinidad, arguably is with our immigration policy. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, we'll get into your regional report.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinidadians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Safe and sound, that's how we'll get you to the biggest North Coast Jazz ever. No hassle and no worries. Park your ride at the Queen's Park Savannah. Hop on board a safe and secure shuttle with your $100 return fee, and that's it. Service begins at 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. and returns from festival grounds from 7 p.m. Park and ride, a $100 return fee, first come, first go shuttle service to festival grounds, Blashy shares. No hassle and no worries. North Coast Jazz, May 27th. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 38 Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.
Thank you for staying with us here on AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get straight into your regional updates. So we start with the islands of Antigua and Barbuda, where Prime Minister the Honourable Gaston Brown has urged unions representing public sector workers to be responsible and reasonable in their demands for better pay and conditions. The head of government says unreasonable demands could push the country into a crisis. He also made it clear that the government is understanding of the plight of the workers. We take a look at this report.
The Prime Minister placing matters into context as increasing numbers of public sector workers agitate for increased salaries.
I find though that political elements are now taking over the leadership of these institutions, and they're becoming a little reckless with their demands. And if this continues unabated, they could plunge the country into a crisis, because at the end of the day, if the government is called upon to pay increases that it cannot afford, then there will be only one or two possible options.
The head of government, who is also finance minister, says each option for the government, if that were to happen, would be challenging for the country.
One, we increase taxes, or two, we retrench, or maybe both, so possibly three. Now, we would like to maintain the stability in prices, so we would not want to necessarily increase prices at this time by increasing taxes. And in addition, we are opposed to retrenching. So we continue to ask for some level of reasonableness. Workers, we understand the difficulties, but they also have to understand too that government revenues have declined significantly as a result of COVID, and we are still suffering from the lingering effects of COVID.
Prime Minister Brown says the government has already committed to ensuring improved wages, despite what some multilateral agencies have said.
Yes, we have agreed to give an increase, and this is despite the advice of the IMF and other institutions who have asked us to try and hold any increases in salaries and wages. But notwithstanding, you said, you know what, we have to go the extra mile. But having gone the extra mile and we've been pushed to go beyond the capacity of the government, then they're going to create a crisis. And I just want them to know that their actions also have consequences. Not that we're threatening anyone, but if we don't sensitize the public as to the possible consequences of demands that are beyond the means of the government, then perhaps they can argue that they made demands out of ignorance. So I think it's in our interest, our remit as leaders, to bring to the attention the possible consequences without it being, or let's say our position being considered as a threat.
Prime Minister Brown says there is also another risk to unreasonable demands for wage increases. They would have an inflationary impact at a time when inflation is already a significant challenge.
Well, that report coming out of Antigua and Barbuda with respect to unions fighting for better wages and conditions. Well, the Prime Minister is acknowledging that the government is very much aware and is empathetic of the plight of the workers. However, he's suggesting at this point in time, unreasonable demands will not be met, given the impact that it can have on the economy of the islands. So at this point, no further updates with respect to wage negotiations in Antigua and Barbuda, given the government and the Prime Minister on behalf of the government has made his position extremely clear. I don't think you get more clear than that. Oftentimes you will hear Gaston Brown, the Honourable Gaston Brown, being absolutely affirmative and even making commentary that is rather strong in nature. But this was actually a bit more calming on his part. Anyway, as we move on, we take a look at Haiti, where the security situation in Haiti has spiraled out of control since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July of 2021. The country is increasingly beset by violence. The country is also at the mercy of criminal gangs, and half the population is struggling to find food. We take a look at this report courtesy WESN's Associates, France 24.
Jesumène works for a family in Port-au-Prince, but sometimes struggles to feed her children. She feels safer in this new neighborhood, but still worries about her family's future.
The children loved their old neighborhood. They really did. I don't know if they'll want to leave the country when they grow up. I can't really imagine a future for them.
Today I have white rice, rice with beans, red bean sauce, and vegetables.
Daddy is also a single mother. She prepares and sells meals in the street. It's a struggle to keep her business afloat in a country where jobs are scarce. She says she's almost bankrupt.
It's not easy investing in a business because you lose money. For example, this rice is very difficult to find and it's very expensive now. No one can afford even the most basic products. I prepare the meals, but few people actually buy them. I sell very little.
Haiti imports all of its food. Inflation reached 49.3% in January, while the minimum wage is about $100 a month. The United Nations World Food Programme says almost half of the country is experiencing acute food insecurity. Jean-Marc runs a company that imports food for the whole country and employs about 600 people. The French Moroccan has been living in Haiti for over 30 years and has had to adapt to the crisis. Today, importing chicken makes up the bulk of his business, although he also has a more upmarket line of products, which he imports to supply the restaurants he owns in the capital.
This is smoked salmon from Norway, and this is fresh salmon, salmon fillets, which we serve in all our restaurants.
The businessman is pessimistic about the island's economic future. Problems of fuel supply, corruption at customs, lack of security are all in a day's work.
No business wants to invest in Haiti. There are just the businesses that were already here that are just trying to survive and pay their bills, that's all. But at least in terms of food, no matter what, people will always need to eat.
With the situation becoming unmanageable, Jean-Marc is thinking about retiring.
We have about 30 trucks and we always run into problems. We have to have them escorted by the police.
For the past few months, Jean-Marc has been living in the middle of his warehouse. As much as possible, he avoids leaving the fortress he's built.
You see the wall there, it goes around the whole property. As you can see, I have armed security day and night, and guard dogs that I let out at night.
Haiti is considered one of the most dangerous countries in the world. There are believed to be more than 600,000 legal and illegal weapons in circulation in a nation of just under 12 million people. 100 or so gangs are tightening their grip on the capital day after day, up against a weak and under-equipped police force. 18 police officers were killed in different clashes in the last week of January. A commissioner of the Haitian National Police agrees to tell us anonymously about their dangerous working conditions.
There are parts of town where we simply can't enter without an armored vehicle. We need the resources, equipment and vehicles that will allow us not to lose more areas of the city to the gangs.
Some police officers are said to have links with the gangs. But here the law of omerta reigns, and it's the civilians who suffer most from this turf war.
Sad and tragic. Well, don't do justice in describing the situation in Haiti. Now we can analyze the situation from a historical context, and that might take quite some time in terms of a debate. But as it stands, the gangs have a lot more powers, the police service are under-equipped, and the economic crisis in Haiti is worsening by the day. Ladies and gentlemen, we break for WSN's News on the Hour. When we return, we'll continue this morning's procedures as we welcome our final guest for this morning's program. Stay tuned.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Flash flooding in Port of Spain. Man dies in accident in Freeport. Health Minister encourages migrants to get vaccinated. Regionally, Guyana's newly commissioned passenger and cargo ferry to boost economic opportunities. And internationally, man shot dead in Jerusalem after ramming car into civilians. Now for the details. Flash flooding was experienced in several areas throughout the capital city on Monday afternoon following heavy midday showers. Areas underwater include Citygate, Independence Square, Edward Street and Pembroke Street. Parts of Tunapuna, St. James, Claxton Bay, Carenage and several other places were also flooded. A Freeport man has died after getting into a vehicular accident on Sunday. Reports say that 24-year-old Kyle Ali crashed into a wall at Mission Road, Freeport, as he made his way to his friend's home to drop him off. His friend, 20-year-old Kadesh Singh, remains warded at the San Fernando General Hospital. Health Minister Terence Yalsing is calling on the migrant population to take advantage of the opportunity to become vaccinated. He was speaking ahead of the ministry's launch of Vaccination Week on Monday.
We want our migrant population, regardless of your status in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't care about your migrant status. What we care about is you getting vaccinated against the range of diseases that could affect you.
In regional news now, Guyana's President Irfan Ali commissioned the MV Malisha, a vessel which he said will play an integral role in allowing Region 1 to be an important link connecting Guyana with Trinidad and Tobago and open a pathway to increased food production and economic opportunities. Guyana and India had signed a US $12.7 million contract for the 295 seats air-conditioned passenger and cargo ferry. It is expected to assist with government's macro policy of positioning Guyana as the mainstay in the regional food market. In international news now, a Palestinian man has driven his car into a crowd on a Jerusalem street, injuring 5 people before being shot dead by a passerby. Hours earlier on Monday, Israeli troops killed a Palestinian during a raid in the occupied West Bank, the latest in a long series of incidents during an upsurge in violence over the past year. Israel's ambulance service said it treated 5 people who were injured by the car before transferring them to a hospital, including a 70-year-old man who was in a serious but stable condition. Well, that was your News City Hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Safe and sound, that's how we'll get you to the biggest North Coast Jazz ever. No hassle and no worries. Park your ride at the Queen's Park Savannah. Hop on board a safe and secure shuttle with your $100 return fee, and that's it. Service begins at 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. and returns from festival grounds from 7 p.m. Park and ride, a $100 return fee, first come, first go shuttle service to festival grounds Blashy shares. No hassle and no worries. North Coast Jazz, May 27th. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 38 Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.
Welcome back to AM Prime. Thank you for staying with us. I'm pleased to welcome to the program my final guest for this morning's program, funny enough. She's a junior research fellow at the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies. This morning we will be discussing whether or not disabled are at a disadvantage in the sense that the Equal Opportunities Act, well, is it equal enough? And I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Bipaya Parry. Good morning, Dr. Parry.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. I'll start by asking you, does the existing legislative framework here in Trinidad and Tobago, does it actually support equal opportunities as well as fundamental human rights for the disabled?
So thanks for the question. So that's a double-barrel question, right? So I have to take it in part. When we think about equal opportunity, there are different ways someone can conceptualize equal opportunity. And so if you look at the dictionary meaning, in some cases it does mean freedom from discrimination. And so the Equal Opportunity Act does promote anti-discrimination, right? So in that sense, it may be promoting equal opportunity. But when you think about the system under which we're operating into society, meaning capitalism and the guiding principles of capitalism, that's competition. There's another definition that you can actually give to equal opportunity, and that means the chance to compete. And so if we're operating from that definition, definitely no, the Equal Opportunity Act does not promote the opportunity or the chance for persons to compete. It's a little more complex than that as well, right? Something like primary school education, secondary school education, adequate healthcare, those are fundamental human rights. And someone should not have to compete for those things. And so to answer the second part of the question, it definitely does not promote fundamental human rights. We all are aware that primary and secondary school education is often guaranteed through universal mandates, and therefore there's a clash between the definition of equal opportunity as well as the achievement of those fundamental human rights.
So whilst offensive behaviour and discrimination is addressed by the Act, is there, in terms of disabilities, is it that disabled people are at a disadvantage in the context of the Act? Can we just clarify that?
In a number of ways. So, for example, the offensive behavior, there is a distinction between formal discrimination, which relates to organizational policies and practices, and interpersonal or informal discrimination, which relates to inappropriate jokes, rumors, and other negative verbal or non-verbal behavior. And so, with regards to the informal discrimination, the Equal Opportunity Act does protect against it for certain status categories, but not for disability.
Now, in terms of the most common complaints lodged by people with disabilities, is there any information with regards to whether or not it's majority informal discrimination or formal discrimination?
It's both. And so, in the case of disability, obviously, for persons who are seeking redress with regards to informal discrimination, unfortunately, the Act does not support redress for those issues. But just generally from the cases, there were three common things that persons were asking for. And when it came to the informal discrimination, one of the things that complainants were asking for was an apology for the emotional distress or the psychological harm that they experienced. And of course, the Act does not cover that by disability.
And what about the facilities in place to redress such complaints put forward by those who are disabled? Is there enough in terms of the institutional capacity to deal with these complaints?
In terms of the EOC capacity?
Yes.
So that's a good question. It wasn't part of my research, but from my personal interaction with persons within the organization, I do not think they have enough human resources and perhaps other resources to adequately address the complaints. But part of it has to do with, the law itself, right? Because the law is promoting anti-discrimination, but anti-discrimination does not guarantee that persons with disabilities will achieve their fundamental human rights and well-being. So I think it's two things, right? Yes, the EOC perhaps needs to have an expanded capacity to really operationalize the Act, but I think also the Act itself is limited, and therefore changes within the Act is needed, are needed.
But the Act itself, though it is limited, in terms of the operationalization of the Act, is that fully enforced even in its current form?
So that's a very good question. I think it is. Because, and you see it from the complaints and the way the EOC addresses those complaints, they always refer it back to the definition of disability. So in terms of applying what the Act means, that is done 100%. And so again, the challenges with the Act would be the operationalization of the term discrimination, right? And what discrimination means. And essentially discrimination, according to the Act, you have to take into consideration two persons and compare those two persons in circumstances that are not materially different from each other. And you're essentially comparing whether one person is treated less favorably than the other. And so operating from that definition definitely is not going to support equal opportunity for persons. And so let me give you an example to contextualize that. So if a company is accustomed to laying off their workers once they become disabled, it means, and this has been going on for some years, and then someone in 2023 becomes disabled on the job, their response, although there are so many discourses speaking about alternative job arrangements and so forth, the company's response is going to be to lay off that person. And of course, not all companies would have those responses, right? But the general response would be for the company to lay off the person. And according to the definition of discrimination, when you take into consideration that person's circumstance or that person's outcome in the circumstance that they are in and compare it to other persons who were in a similar circumstance, then you would say that no discrimination took place, right? Everybody is being treated in the same way. according to the definition of discrimination. I hope that adds some clarification to the whole concept of discrimination and equal opportunity.
Well, it certainly does, because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it just basically boils down to one thing. Anti-discrimination does not necessarily mean equal opportunity. And,
exactly.
And that is, I'm glad this issue has been raised. Now, in terms of the complaints that have been lodged, in terms of closing these cases, in terms of actually dealing with them, I know we already spoke about the institutional capacity, but in terms of actually dealing with cases, are these cases, those that are actually heard and those that are actually investigated, are they closed easily, or are there various challenges or obstacles in actually trying to deal with such complaints?
So let me just say there is an attempt to investigate all the cases, right? Before it can reach the investigation process, though, depending on how much information the complainant gives, the EOC does reach out to them to get more information, to clarify information that they may have. So that's the first step, right? And so in some cases, actually perhaps in one case, there was someone who never got back to the EOC. With information that they were requesting, and so in that case, the complaint was closed, right? The other issues with regards to complaints being closed would be the time window, right? According to the Act, a person who is lodging a complaint, complaints about discrimination should do so within a 6-month window, and of course, in following through with what the Act says, cases that were lodged, or complaints that were lodged after the 6-month window, they were closed, right? Because that's essentially what the Act says. So when I say there are adjustments to be made to the Act, that is perhaps one of them, right? And so let me just add in there, it was 105 complaints. You're reading these complaints as a researcher, as a human being, and just reading it as a human being. They were very traumatizing experiences that were written in those documents. And so me as a researcher was very traumatized, just engaging with these files. And so I can imagine that it was very traumatizing for these persons who were in the experience. And sometimes, perhaps, when you're experiencing trauma, you perhaps need more than 6 months to process what's happening and realize, oh, I need to do something about this. So that 6-month window definitely needs to be expanded. Or perhaps the circumstances, the regarding exception to that 6-month window need to be explicit within the Act. What do you consider as exceptional circumstances? There were also cases where there was involvement by other external agencies. So it is possible to lodge a complaint with the EOC and also lodge it with another organization. But what was found from analyzing the files is that the EOC did not get involved if the complaint was lodged with another organization, right? And so that there is some conflict there as to how involved the EOC should get when there are other organizations who might be responsible for addressing the issue. And then in a lot of cases, it's actually 53% of the closed cases. According to the Act, following the definition of discrimination in the Act, the conclusion was that discrimination did not take place. And therein lies the issues, because that's where you would find a lot of issues of maladministration, malice in the workplace and in other organizations that is preventing persons with disabilities from accessing the service or accessing the type of work environment that they need to operate in. So again, the definition of discrimination needs some needs to be changed, but specifically, offensive behavior within the Act should cover disability as well. And of course, there were a few complaints that were closed because they fell outside the jurisdiction of the EOC. And again, it comes back down to maladministration and malice and poor organizational procedures. And then as well, there were some complainants who were requesting for their case to be closed. So in some cases, persons would have their complaints would have been referred to conciliation or to the tribunal, but they asked for it to be closed. And they had a very good chance of having, of receiving some sort of redress, right? What shape that redress takes is another story, right? But they had a very good chance because they had documentation in terms of showing that discrimination took place. What was challenging for these persons is that, one, the person who was referred, the complaint that was referred to conciliation, they were not seeking financial compensation. They were essentially seeking some sort of change, which perhaps may not have come out of the conciliation process. Mm-hmm. And then there was another complainant. She actually got a medical condition on the job, and she was having a difficult time just maintaining her health. And therefore, she could not finance the case going to the tribunal. And so just to say, when a case is referred to the tribunal, it's the complainant who's expected to cover the cost for the legal procedures and whatnot. And so
that's a very important point that you've just raised there.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate, and I say this because so I've been researching disability for some years now, and one of the things that's emerging in my own work, and then something that's emerging in the general literature globally, is that persons with disabilities experience extra costs when they're accessing services. And so, like, let me just give an example to contextualize it, right? So someone who is accessing healthcare, like you and I accessing healthcare, we might jump in our car, be able to drive to the hospital, or if we have to use higher transportation, we were able to do that very easily, take public transportation and go there. But someone with a disability may actually have to hire transportation. Yeah. And while it might cost like $6 or $12 Trinidad dollars to reach the hospital, that person might have to pay like $50, perhaps more, just to get to the hospital. And then obviously there's the trip back home, right?
So even the cost of lodging a complaint and the cost of it going to tribunal, is that really a costly adventure? Like, is it something that actually even restricts the ability for people with disabilities to try and have their voices heard and their complaints actually seen to?
Right. So that's a very interesting question. And so it's something my colleagues and I have had to think about recently. And so when you think about the EOC process in terms of filing a complaint, it is possible to file a complaint via email, via the website, but this is in person as well, and you can post it as well. But this is assuming that persons actually have the finances to access the online website, to send an email, or to even post it, or even to appear in person, right? It's a big assumption to assume that persons would be able to cover the costs associated with these things, right? We are very much aware that not everybody in Trinidad and Tobago has Wi-Fi, that they may not be able to afford Wi-Fi. So that is something that definitely needs to be taken into consideration when, with the complaint process. The other thing is that we are also assuming that persons are literate. Persons with disabilities historically have been excluded from many aspects of society, including education. And so not all persons with disabilities have formal basic education and may not be able to complete that form on their own. And I think even if the message comes across in terms of, oh, you can file a complaint with the EOC, to seek redress for whatever you're experiencing, for them, how does that translate into actually carrying out?
Yes.
Lodging a complaint is another story. And all of these things need to be taken into consideration.
Beyond that, I also know that you mentioned that there are those who actually decided not to go further with their complaints. They've actually withdrew their complaints. Is there that sense of further discrimination with going through this process? Are we fearful that even when we're trying to have these situations sorted out, the results of that can lead to further discrimination?
So yes, another very interesting question. So other than the closed complaints and it being there being a request by the complainant to close the complaints, there were complaints that were withdrawn, right? This was actually a about 46% of those withdrawn cases. And so let me just give another example so you understand while I answer the question. So there was a situation where a parent was trying to enroll their child into primary school, and they were essentially rejected from 3 primary schools. And then the parents had lodged a complaint and eventually withdrew the complaint because she went to a 4th primary school who took in the child. And now, so she got what she wanted, essentially, right? Enrollment for the child. But what we do not know, and essentially what your question is asking, we do not know if this child has access to education within the education system, right? I'm also doing another piece of research with regards to children who didn't have Wi-Fi or devices during the pandemic. And one of the things emerging from that research is that there are teachers who are discriminatory. And so this is students who don't have a disability, and there is some discrimination there. So I do believe that perhaps discrimination at the teacher level is happening within the primary and secondary school system as well, that may be hindering children with disabilities from getting quality education within Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I'm glad we've had this conversation and we've gone to the extent that we have, because not only have we realized that the existing legislative framework, it needs to be amended, because currently, arguably, there is weak legislation. It does not cover all grounds. Furthermore, beyond that, just bad administration, as you mentioned, and the example that you just gave, even within the school setting, given the fact that there is weak legislation, certainly does not help the case at all. But Dr. Bipai Parry, I want to thank you very much once more for joining me on the program this morning. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you sharing this information based on your research with us. So thank you very much for that.
Great. Thank you for having me.
All the very best. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we now take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, we'll conclude this morning's program. Stay tuned.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered,
the conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Well, it certainly is a rainy day here in Trinidad and Tobago. Yesterday, actually, we had some heavy rains which led to flooding over various parts of East and West Trinidad. We hope that you got home safe yesterday, and we hope today, even though it is raining, it's better than what we experienced yesterday in terms of the floods. As is always, given global warming and climate change, April showers are nothing new, but they are actually more than what was initially anticipated. So whatever you do today, carry your umbrella with you, and please just be careful, be safe, and take care of yourself. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for starting your day with me. It's always a pleasure. I've always enjoyed it, and I look forward to another edition of AM Prime again tomorrow morning. But until then, have a great day, make it a productive one, and just remember, you can make all things possible if you just really put your mind to it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Keaton Shaw, this is AM Prime. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, bright and early. Bye-bye.
WESN. North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Safe and sound, that's how we'll get you to the biggest North Coast Jazz ever. No hassle and no worries. Park your ride at the Queen's Park Savannah. Hop on board a safe and secure shuttle with your $100 return fee, and that's it. Service begins at 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. and returns from festival grounds from 7 p.m. Park and ride, a $100 return fee, first come, first go shuttle service to festival grounds Blashy shares. No hassle and no worries. North Coast Jazz, May 27th. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.
I'm Andre L. Batiste, and you're watching WESN, the content capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, and you are watching WESN, the Content Capital.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered,
the conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
I'm Andy Johnson, and you're watching WESN, the content capital.
Balancing your career and work with your personal life is a struggle.
I thought it was a good example I was setting for my kids. So they would see hard work, perseverance, long hours pays off. But I never felt like I could have achieved enough. It was never enough.
A lot of people, because of those trauma and original sensitizing events and how we were brought up, we tend to put ourselves last. We tend to put other people first, work first, other people, and we tend to put ourselves last. And that is a recipe for disaster.
What's Up, Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
This May, the spectacular event you've been waiting for is coming. May 27th, celebrate amazing North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Festival grounds, Blushy Shares. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
I am Sule A. Joseph, and we are WESN, Content Capital.
The artists you'll meet, The sounds will astonish you. Superb voices, new artists, simply refreshing. Celebrate amazing. May 27th, North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Festival grounds Blanchishes. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny's Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.